the Canaan STL podcast, brought to you by Canaan Baptist Church, where we exist to connect you to what matters most, to God, to people, and to purpose. Hey, this is Pastor Daniel, and joined here by Pastor Martin Winslow. Happy New Year, Martin.
Happy New Year, Daniel.
It is 2023.
Can you believe it? We made it.
It's crazy.
We made it to another one.
Yes, by God's grace. Yep. 2023. What are some things you expect to happen in 2023?
Well, good things or bad things?
Well, all the above.
Just predictions.
Hopefully you're not expecting bad things.
Well, U.S. economy, I'm a little concerned.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
Inflation.
those kind of bad things. Yeah.
That kind of could be a negative thing. But as far as like good things, I expect my my diet plan to work out pretty well. What about you?
That's a bad thing for me. Too many bad experiences there.
Yeah.
One thing I'm not looking forward to is all the rhetoric ramping up to election.
Getting closer. Yeah.
Gosh, it's going to the presidential election. That was 2020, 19 and 20 was crazy because of all that. Yeah.
It was.
That's coming.
And buddy, it gets more ugly every
it does.
time. Doesn't it?
You're right.
Every cycle, it seems like people get angry and angrier.
Yeah. Well, what about good things? What good things other than your diet working out?
So good things. So, after this, this year, I'm going to have a daughter who's going to be a senior in 2023.
Wow.
Which is pretty exciting.
Yep.
And she's kind of on a trajectory now.
Yeah.
Also, in October, I'm going to do my first half Ironman.
Oh, my goodness.
Which is
70. For me, that would be one of the bad things that would happen.
I think you'd like it. So it's 70.3 miles for the half. It's 1.2 swim, 56 on a bike, and then 13.2.
See, swimming and bike, I'd be great with that.
Yeah.
It's the running. I just
part.
hate to run.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so boring to me. But everybody's different.
Well,
give me some of the ball. I can play all day.
Yeah. Is that from your military days, though?
I don't know.
Did they run your tail off?
They did.
Military?
Yeah, they did a lot. But I don't know. I think even before that, though.
You weren't into it?
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
In college baseball, I was a pitcher. So, you had a week between starts. You only pitch once a week. And so that week in between starts, man, they ran our tails off. And so we did tons of like ab work and lower body stuff. But they also made us run. And when I got out of college baseball, I was like, I am never running again. And it wasn't until I was 35
that you started. When I got out of the Army, I said, I'm done running. But I haven't gotten that
you
new.
Haven't picked it up?
I haven't picked it up yet. Yeah, and here I'm 51 or almost 51. So, that's interesting. Yeah, good.
So I think that's going to be good. Church life, as far as like church life is concerned, man, we got so many cool things going on. I'd say by the middle of February, we're hoping that Mario and Hilda and his family's here to plant the church in Fairmont City. Yep. We've got the possibility of 2 campuses starting up pretty soon. Yep. I mean, you talk about that. These are exciting things.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the days of Canaan, huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're looking to, have a vote on a church structure, probably making that motion in January and then having a vote sometime in February. And then if that all goes well, which I hope it will, but we are looking to pretty quickly move to a couple new campuses, and which is exciting. It really is exciting.
That's huge.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
What about you, like on a personal level?
Yeah, well, maybe this could be the year where my oldest daughter and her husband get pregnant. Yeah, maybe this year I could at least have the hope of being a grandpa. You're
ready, aren't you?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready to be a grandpa. Yeah. What do you want to be called when you're a grandpa? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah. So what are some names that you've heard? And I'll tell you the ones that I've heard.
Well, So when I was growing up, I had my mom's dad. He was Big Daddy.
Okay, Big Daddy.
Loved it.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what I want to be called. I want to be called
Big
Daddy. Big Daddy, yeah.
You picked it out.
I did. And then my other one was Papaw.
Papaw.
Okay. Papaw and Big Daddy. And then both of my grandmothers were Memaw. So Memaw and Big Daddy, and then Memaw and Papaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a Pawpaw in our family.
Yeah. That's my terrace size, a Pawpaw.
And a G-Paw.
Oh, we don't have that.
And then there's do we have a Meemaw? And a Mama.
Okay.
We got a Mama.
Yeah. So I want to be Big Daddy. Guess what Tara wants to be called? This is hilarious.
Don't tell me big woman.
No, not Big Mama.
Big
No,
Mama.
That was my kid's joke for her, though. But no, she wants to be called Toots. There's only one problem. How do you spell Toots? Toots. Spell like toots. So we're not doing that.
But she wants to be called Toots.
She'd love to be called Toots. Big Daddy and Toots. Isn't that cool? I like that,
That actually goes together pretty good.
It does, really well.
Big
really
Daddy and Toots.
Yeah. So my mom and dad, they wanted to be Memaw and Papaw.
Yeah.
But my brother's first child, he was the first grandchild, so he actually named them. And for him, he just couldn't say Memaw and Papaw. Came out Mamu and Babu. Well, that's what stuck. They were Mamu and Babu the whole time. In fact, we already buried my dad. On his tombstone is Babu. Yeah. And we got a mark already from my mom, and it's already on there, Mamu.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Yep.
Now, it seems slightly inappropriate for me to walk up to Tara on Sunday and say, "Hey, Toots, how are you?"
I know, right? It is. That's what she like.
You got to remember, though, but calling you Big Daddy, that's kind of funny.
That is great. I love it.
Like
yeah, call me Big Daddy. Like yeah, but not yet. I don't have a grandkid yet. But and it may come up B-Da. It might be something like B-Da or something crazy like that. It's whatever comes out of their mouth. That's what sticks.
I love it.
Yep. It's good stuff. Well, hey, what are we talking about to start this new year off?
Yeah, I think we got this idea from the Kevinator.
Kevin himself.
The guy in the chair.
Yes.
And he makes everything happen for us in the podcast.
Does a great job.
He does. And not only does he do that here, but on Sunday mornings, Kevin's the guy, a lot of times, if he's not up playing on stage, he's making everything happen.
That's right. He's absolutely. So blessed to have Kevin. Yeah. And just to give him props and Nathan props, they're hosting this thing called Level Up in like a couple of weeks, January 22nd. Where it started as training for all of our tech and worship people, but they invited other churches. There's 5 different churches coming.
That's incredible.
To this Level Up training. I mean, it's going to be awesome.
Wow, we better hold on to these guys.
I know, absolutely. We've got a great team.
That's awesome.
Great team. Yeah, they get it. It's not just about Canaan. It's about the kingdom.
I love that.
Love it.
Yeah. So Kevin had the idea today. He said, why don't you guys talk about books outside the scriptures? Of course, the book is the one that's had the biggest impact on our life because it's the Word of God.
Absolutely.
But we've also had other books that have impacted us throughout time that could be helpful even to our listeners that maybe haven't heard about some of these titles. And we didn't make a list or anything. We're literally going out of the top of our mind.
But it's easy to do. There's definitely books that stand out. It really shaped my thinking or motivated me in certain directions of how I live, and it's timely because, New Year's to think about, hey, well, what do I want to accomplish?
Right.
And, we usually think in terms of health and habits and that sort of thing. Well, probably not many things, if anything, that's more life-changing or life-developing than what we read.
Yeah, right.
Or if we read, right?
Sure.
And, I know there's a lot of people have said this famous saying that the moment you stop reading and learning, you stop leading.
Yeah.
Or you can also say the moment you stop learning, you stop growing.
Yeah, right.
And so we're to be lifelong learners. Every great leader in history has been a lifelong learner. And how do we learn? We learn through instruction. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 20, it says, listen to advice and accept instruction so that you may gain wisdom in the future. So it's so important for us to gain that instruction, and learn from lessons learned by other people, And so let's talk about let's start with this. What has been, just name one book that has really made a big impact in your life.
Yeah, so in 2009, I read a book called The Hole in Our Gospel. And when I read that book...
And who wrote that book?
Yeah, a guy named Richard Stearns. And I'm not sure if he still is, but he was the president of World Vision at the time.
Okay.
And the first 3 chapters are all his testimony. And he taught, and this was a guy who was a very, very wealthy businessman. I think he worked for maybe Monopoly or somebody like a game company, but he did several different things, and he made millions and millions of dollars. But he had some sort of and I can't remember everything I read in the book, but he had some sort of an encounter with the third world through missions, and God broke his heart for the poor and the need for the gospel to go to the nations. And so, he talks about, I distinctly remember him talking about when he was fighting with the Lord over this, being under the sheets, under the covers, pulling him over his head, God, no, I don't want to give up this cushy job and do this thing. But the Lord called him out of that. And really opened his eyes up to the poor and the need for the gospel to go to the poor. And literally, I would say that was one of the big catalysts. It was at the end of that year that Kurt Wee and I began to pray about Africa. And before the year was over, we were on a trip to Zambia.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And BCA started.
And so BCA was born.
Yeah, it really was. And then through a fresh reading of the Gospels during that time, there was a lot of conviction. So I'd say, I mean, that had a huge impact on my life.
Yeah.
And still does.
Yeah. That's awesome. What about what about like a theological forming book?
Yeah. Mere Christianity was probably the first one for me.
Yep.
By C.S. Lewis.
Yep.
His take on the moral law and that just being written on the hearts of men really helped me to kind of see. It was interesting. I heard Dinesh D'Souza wrote this down not too long ago. He talked about how every world religion realizes that there's a problem with man. And the question is, man's down here in this lower form, and how does he escape to this upper realm of morality? He knows he's broken.
Yep. And
he talks about all the major world religions try to answer that, right? You got Hinduism and Buddhism that try to become indifferent about life. And so they don't fulfill these lusts of the flesh, right? They starve themselves of those things. And that's the way they achieve the upper life. And then you've got Judaism and Islam that are full of rules.
Yeah.
And that's how they get to the upper life.
That's right.
But here's what's interesting. He points out that this is what Christianity did, is the upper life actually came to us.
That's exactly right.
It came down. And that's the only way. And that's the difference. And you can see those answers in Lewis's book, Mere Christianity, that the upper life came to us in Christ. And that's the answer to man's problem that he deals with every day.
Yeah, that's good.
I kind of went too far there, but
no, that's great.
That was the idea in Mere Christianity.
Yeah. A couple stand out to me. One is the biography of George Mueller. And just an incredible life, pretty obscure character. I mean, some people have heard of him. He's not uncommon, but he was a very devout follower of Christ in Europe in the early 1800s, and just felt really called by the Lord to take care of orphans. Yeah. And so he set out to start an orphanage, but he never asked anyone for a dime.
Yeah.
He only prayed.
Wow.
He just prayed. He was a man of prayer. Yeah. So he's written so much about prayer and how to discern the will of God. Even, there was this very famous Bible study called Experiencing God. Yeah. It's around back in the 90s, 2000s, still around. It's a great study by Henry Blackaby, Claude King, but they actually quote George Mueller on how do you discern the will of God, and so George Mueller had just grown this orphanage, and I mean, he served thousands of orphans, never asked for a dime, just prayed. And there was stories of him with the kids at the table. They had no food. And so he just said, well, boys, let's pray. And so they prayed, and as soon as he said amen, there's a knock at the door. He went and opened the door, and there's a guy out there with a wagon full of food. Say, hey, we just felt led by the Lord to bring y'all some food and donate it to your orphanage. And that is a common type story in his meta story. It's just incredible. Just such a man of prayer and accomplished so much. Yeah. And he was just a very simple guy.
Praise God for guys like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
I'll tell you another biographies. I really love biographies.
I'm the same way. Yeah. Keep going.
I love the biography The Hiding Place, Corrie ten Boom.
Oh man. One of my favorites. Yep.
Wow. So that's about Corrie ten Boom. She was where was she? She in Holland?
Yeah.
She was in Holland, and her family were helping the Jewish people hide, and it's what's called the hiding place, right? But they got busted. And so her and her whole family got deported and put in concentration camps, and so the big part of the story is her and her sister in the concentration camp, and just her faith and how she just incredible, the little things that she saw God do and the big things she saw God do, and just her tenacity of faith and her every day in and day out, her choosing. It was really more her sister than her, according to how she tells it. Her sister was just so faithful and so true to staying positive in the midst of the horrors of a concentration camp. Of course, her sister doesn't survive, but she does. Yeah, goes on to have an incredible ministry up until when did she pass away? It's not been all that long ago. 10 years ago.
Oh, I would have thought it was longer than
maybe.
That.
Maybe it was.
I'm not sure. Yeah, but like you said, incredible international ministry after that.
Yeah,
right? And a person who would extend forgiveness when you would think it would be all but impossible to forgive in this circumstance.
Yeah, she actually meets one of the guards later on and forgives him.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing.
Yeah, those stories are phenomenal. You brought something to my mind that recently, and I've read a couple of books by Frederick Douglass, who's a slave, who gets out of slavery during the time of Lincoln, and he was just a phenomenally gifted guy, great orator. But I had just read about this encounter that he had with the man who he was a slave to when he was a kid. That he met, this man requested his presence as he was on his deathbed.
Wow.
And he and Frederick Douglass went to him and they reconciled. And it was just
what a great story.
Yeah, like what would you do without those stories, right?
Yeah.
So we think about the scriptures, right? And to me, that was just like the Joseph story, like in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
It just brought it to life in a different century for me. And so that's why I think reading is so important. The stuff you're saying, the stuff I'm saying, these had huge impacts on who we are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, and I know one thing that I remember, I used to think this because when I was young, I didn't read much. I didn't like to read. You know, I was too active, too much energy to sit and be still and read. Right. And I remember thinking, well, only smart people read. Right.
Yeah. Right.
That's not true. It's partially
I'm
true.
proof. I'm actually proof of that.
Reading makes you smarter.
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, show me a smart person. That's probably someone who's read a lot.
Yeah. Right.
Or read some. You know, so reading just really expands our understanding of things because we got all these other perspectives and these things that we don't think of on our own. Like, my example, John Piper. So I remember early seminary, we had to read this book by John Piper called Desiring God. And its subtitle really threw me for a loop. It says, Thoughts or Meditations on Being a Christian Hedonist.
Yeah.
And first I had to go look up what hedonist meant. And you look it up and it's like a pleasure seeker.
Yeah,
which seems like the antithesis of what the Christian life is all about, right? In fact, he came under a lot of flack for that. But I started reading this book, and it really changed so much for me on how I view God, how I view the Christian life, how I view what obedience is all about. You know, because prior to that time, I had kind of had this thought process that, okay, well, I could either go do what I want to do and be happy, or make myself be obedient to the Lord and be obedient, but be kind of miserable.
Right.
So that was the way I was thinking, right?
Yep.
But this book really helped me see that that's not true at all.
Yep.
That my true joy and happiness is really bound into my obedience and following God, because God's most glorified when I'm most satisfied in Him. That's kind of John Piper's big tagline is God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him. And that my joy, happiness, excitement of life is really only in its fullness when I am right in the will of glory and glorifying God and following Him. That was, even though it seems like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
It was revolutionary for me, you know,
Right.
and then you just unpack so much about that, how that affects worship, how that affects serving, how that affects disciple making, how that affects how I love my wife. All of that is bound up into that, right? That was revolutionary for me.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, and you know, that book is phenomenal. I read that book too, and you're exactly right. In fact, it reminds me, you know, in the early church, right, in the book of Romans, Paul's making this argument with these Jews against like that the keeping of the law is where happiness is found, right? Nobody's able to totally keep the law. But the Jews get the idea then that Paul's saying, well, he's like what they call antinomian, against the law. But Paul's like, no, the law is great. The problem is us, we can't keep it.
That's right.
And so the Jews are like, well, nobody's going to try to keep it if you don't tell them to keep it. And that's the whole point, though, is when grace invades your life, right?
Yeah.
You and I only find real pleasure in doing what God says.
That's right.
And so we're drawn to the law, even though we know we can't keep it perfectly. We're still drawn to that law, and that's where we're satisfied, is actually in keeping the commands
absolutely.
of God.
Paul even says in Romans 7, I agree that the law is good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
that's
it's
right.
just me that's messed up.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
but that doesn't. But that does. It is still true, though, that when we do the things that are right, we find great fulfillment and satisfaction.
Yep.
Right. The law is beautiful. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. That's good. Yeah, that's good. So just just kind of top 5 books. I would say for me, maybe top 5. Like this should be on everyone's reading list, right? Kind of deal. We already mentioned some, like you mentioned C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. Yeah, that should be, every Christian, I believe, should read that book.
Yep.
John Piper's Desiring God. It's not an easy read. Yep. It's one of those books you read a page. And go, let me go back and read that again. You know, he gets really heady, but it's doable. Hiding Place is good.
Yep.
For me, I love Jim Cymbala's Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire book on.
I've not read it. I've heard all about it.
Corporate prayer. I mean, just a great story of the power of prayer in a church. I've always longed to have that kind of
Yeah.
prayer meeting at our church, and we're making some good steps, but we're still not close there. But and then we were just talking about this before we started. Is just The Insanity of God by Nick Ripken.
Yep, good one.
Oh, incredible book about him going and just interviewing him and his wife. They were IMB missionaries. Just had a really tough season in Somalia right before all that stuff went out in the early 90s. And so then he set out to go and just interview all these different believers in these hard places where Christianity was illegal, and they had suffered intense persecution. Like he went into former Soviet Union, went into China, went into parts of Indonesia where it's just really dangerous to be a Christian. And he interviews them like, how do you do this? And it's just so incredible. Yeah. The stories.
Phenomenal.
Great book. Yeah. So that'd be some of my top ones. Yeah. And, yeah. What about you?
Yeah. So I read a book a few years ago by a guy named Jerry Sitzer, who's actually a professor of New Testament. I can't remember where he's at. He's out at West somewhere. But he wrote a book called A Grace Disguised. And it's actually a book on mourning. He tells his story in there, and the thing that he went through was just phenomenal loss, like catastrophic loss. He was up on a Navajo reservation with his family on a trip, just doing a family trip. So if you out there, our listeners, if you know anybody dealing with like mourning and pain of that, this is a good book. But and he was headed home with his family, and a guy who was a drunk driver came across the middle lane, hit them head on, and killed his wife, his mother-in-law, and his firstborn daughter.
Oh,
Three generations died in a moment. And the other kids were alive and saw it. And then he had to deal with everything that came from that catastrophic loss. And he works through it. And some of the wisdom that I gained from this book, and like just trying to have compassion for people going through loss and things like that. It was helpful for me to do funerals and to just deal with like trying to comfort people who have had those catastrophic type things happen. And so for me, that's been up at on top of my list. I've recommended it a lot to families.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's good.
And then there's another great book on the Advent that, and I think there's one on the resurrection too.
That is shameless. I know, right? Shameless plug. I like it. That's good. So lastly, let's just talk about, what different kinds of books. So someone said, okay, I need to start reading. How do we help someone who wants to start reading? I would say, just look at, there's different kinds of books, biographies. Yeah. You got like theology, Christian living type books. You've got kind of historical books, and I would say what would be some categories to start in?
Yeah. Well, it does depend on kind of, I think, what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
I remember when I was 16 years old, I didn't like to read a lot either. And I read the book, I read sports books. So I read the book Jordan Rules when it came out, that was bashing Michael Jordan for how he treated his teammates, Yeah. So, but there wasn't like a lot of good spiritual fodder in that or anything. But some things like recently I turned my daughter on to the book by Solomon Northrop called 12 Years a Slave. And I was like, and this guy is a solid, strong believer that was born, I think he was born free in the North and was actually captured by these guys. He was a violin player, had his family. He was captured. They did a movie on it called 12 Years a Slave. Captured, taken down south, and for 12 years he fought to get his freedom back. And eventually he was reunited with his family. But the things he says in that book about the providence of God and like being kind of like Joseph during that time period when he went off the grid, right? And how God restored him is just, his perspective was phenomenal. So that's like a good book. Like I like a good story. You and I were just talking like biographies are just incredible. I also read a great book a year or two ago on the life of John Newton. That was phenomenal. I think David McCullough wrote that book, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. So I'd say find that area that you love. Hopefully, it's not these crazy romance books or anything like that. But find something that really matters. But
even if you're a reader and you like the crazy romance fiction books, take a step towards historical fiction. Where there's a lot of great biblical historical fiction books that have been written. In fact, our own Heather Kaufman, that's the genre she's getting into in writing and endorsed to write. So that's a good genre to just take good steps in, get away from the the corrupt, perverted romance novels and all that. But there's good historical fiction that tells great stories, but you also learn true history through reading those. That's a good genre.
Yeah, I think so. And you point out Heather Kaufman. I mean, those books that she's going to do and publish with Bethany House, which is a huge publisher. I mean, it's her big break. Like when those come out, we want to really promote those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be phenomenal.
They will be great.
She's got a book, I think it's called Loving Isaac, that my daughters read and loved it.
Yep.
And my mom read it and loved it.
Yeah.
Heather is an incredible writer.
She's a great storyteller.
Yep.
Yeah, she sure is.
Thankful to have her here for
Absolutely. Sure. So there's a lot of good genres, but definitely biography. I probably learn more from biographies than any other genre. Yeah.
Well, we need to swap some titles.
We do. Yeah.
Because,
absolutely.
I like them too.
Sounds good. Well, hey, send us your thoughts and ideas as well. And glad that all of you joined us for this installation of Canaan STL podcast. Hope you're having a great new year. And we will talk to you next time on Canaan STL podcast.